I've got something you want. The only thing you want.
Over the years, we have seen a lot of renditions of Lex Luthor, with each one having their own take on the character. Jesse Eisenberg gave us a version that looked way off compared to what we have seen over the years, and still made a memorable attempt. But the one version that hasn't been forgotten is the Clancy Brown-voiced Lex Luthor from the DC animated universe. Since many of the old animated shows are returning nowadays, no one can deny that the DC animated shows had their quality and narratives. Lex Luthor was given one of the best arcs in this animated series, and fans occasionally do rewatch this show. Look at some of Lex Luthor's best moments from the DC animated shows. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Lex Luthor.
The first encounter with Superman, the last son of Krypton, Parts 2 and 3, Episodes 2 and 3 of Superman the Animated Series. The Last Son of Krypton trilogy of episodes, which serves as Superman's origin story, also introduces us to his key adversary, Lex Luthor. In the very second episode, we see Luthor making his presence known, setting the stage for the conflict that will last through many of these animated shows. After setting up Clark Kent's arc in Metropolis and his association with the Daily Bugle, Clark Kent's journalistic capabilities are left to be put together. When Lois Lane leaves Clark, intending to focus on her work, Clark impresses her by working out a way of covering the event where Lex Luthor will unveil his latest weapon. The weapon he had built was the Lexoskeleton Suit 5000, basically like Iron Man's Hulkbuster suit. During this event, a couple of goons attack and steal the suit, which is when Superman is forced to appear. Soon, he is busy when one of the attacks from the goons hits a passenger jet. While this arc develops Superman's reputation, Luthor is much more busy establishing and finding out about the superhero. We find that this villain intended for the suit to land in the hands of the terrorists so that he could strike a deal with the US government for more such suits. Superman ends up being forced to save Lois Lane from a significant situation when she is investigating this scenario. So he faces Lex Luthor for a chat. And yes, it would be the interaction that would begin their rivalry. While Luthor tries to flex his power, Superman gives him the silent treatment. And finally, the Man of Steel utters, "I'll be watching you, Luthor." Yes, this begins the rivalry that would pit these two characters against each other. And Clancy Brown does an excellent job at voicing Lex Luthor.
Divergent from our own. We'll need to test it out on Superman himself.
Luthor and his thugs. A little piece of home. Episode 5 of Superman the Animated Series. This episode shows us why the rivalry between these two characters lasted for a long time, considering Lex Luthor is no ordinary enemy. During another one of Luthor's events, some goons manage to sneak into the event, and Clark, being present there, takes on the role of Superman. But for the first time, a particular mineral makes him weak during the process, and Luthor takes no time but jumps into investigating this mineral, hoping to find a weakness for the Man of Steel. Upon investigating the minerals, Luthor finds that they belong to another solar system, and he realizes that it would make for the perfect weapon against the superhero. But before finalizing this, he decides to check on it by faking a heist that the superhero would crash. He is successful, as Superman ends up coming to him in the end. And it's here that Luthor tries to make a deal by stating that he will allow Superman to live if he is left alone. Later, he manages to put Superman in much more danger by pitting him against a T-Rex with kryptonite in its mouth. Luckily, Superman figures out how to block the adverse effects kryptonite. He takes it down using lead and manages to throw this kryptonite into outer space. But Lex had already managed to launch a worldwide expedition to look for more kryptonite deposits.
Welcome to Earth. I'm Lex Luthor, the one who intercepted your transmission.
Lex Luthor and Brainiac's encounter. Stolen Memories. Episode 8 of Superman, the Animated Series. While the first 3 episodes set up the arc of many characters in the series, they also laid the groundwork for Brainiac around the end of the 3 episodes, when Brainiac's satellites show up and kill a couple of aliens who bring the satellite into their ship. Finally, We get a chance to continue this arc when Lex Luthor manages to reach out to him, hoping to make a deal. Luthor ends up trusting Brainiac without properly exploring this being, even after being warned by Superman, who had managed to find some details about Brainiac. If things go wrong, Luthor has plans to destroy Brainiac's satellite if the trade of information between them goes wrong. The trade of information allows Brainiac to shut down Luthor's control, hence Luthor realizes they are no longer in business. Since Brainiac intends to destroy the planet, Superman goes against him and allows Luthor missiles to be launched at the satellite. This attack destroys Brainiac's satellite, save for the information that this being has gathered while traveling across space over the years. This episode lays a lot of seeds that will develop into exciting plots in future series episodes.
I've seen enough.
Luthor and his new date. Now, we arrive at an episode that makes a lot of references to Superman's past when his old friend Lana Lang returned. However, she doesn't make the usual appearance and appears as Lex Luthor's date instead, which might prove too dangerous for either Lex Luthor or Superman. Lana Lang knows Superman's true identity because she figured it out based on the skills that Clark Kent had shown back in school, and the fact that both Superman and Kent arrived in Metropolis simultaneously. But Superman tries to warn her about Luthor, which Lana doesn't pay much heed to until later. One of the interactions between Lana and Superman is seen by Luthor's associates. He doesn't heed it, but plans to do something about it later. Lana states that she will work as Superman's informant and confess that she still has feelings for Kent, and Superman is somewhat taken aback. But he still warns her about her role as an informant, which she doesn't take seriously, and she gets caught quite easily when one of Luthor's people manages to see when she tries to pass some information regarding Luthor's weapon deal. Even though Superman manages to save Lana Lang, all the effort doesn't go to waste. By the end, Lana's information makes it to the news, with Luthor being investigated over his weapon deal. Can he beat Superman? Brave New Metropolis, Episode 12, Season 2 of Superman the Animated Series. If you're talking about alternative universes, this episode features one of the most fantastic storylines built around alternative timeline. While fighting around with a gadget at Star Labs, Lois Lane is suddenly transported to an alternate timeline where Metropolis has an entirely different fate than the one we have known. Superman and Lex Luthor have teamed up and become ruthless leaders, and they have their statues. But it takes no time to realize how this happened when the Superman of this universe reveals that Lois Lane on his planet died and he had a breakdown. No, Luthor used this opportunity to his benefit and made Superman the thing he used to be against. The episode proves that Luthor is aware of more than one weakness of Superman, which can affect him and make him a weapon of mass destruction. But luckily, Lois Lane managed to pop up in this alternate reality, and she also slapped Superman for the choices he had made. Upon finding that she is still alive, Luthor tries to get her killed, only for Superman to come in and save her by the end. And then he goes to confront Luthor for everything that has happened so far. In the end, Luthor dies in this alternate universe when his aircraft crashes into a statue. Yes, I know. Quite the poetic justice. But then, Lois Lane asks out Superman when she returns to her universe, so we can thank Luthor for accelerating the relationship between Superman and Lois Lane. But there's an exciting development here, something most villains do, and Luthor is no exception. During his escape from Superman's attacks, Mercy falls behind Luthor, but he doesn't help her out, so he continues to save himself. Yeah, Luthor had no mercy for Mercy. But we will get some development on this angle in another episode in the future.
Those jackals are going to crucify me.
Luthor's Frustration, Ghost in the Machine, Episode 12, Season 2 of Superman the Animated Series. Lex Luthor conducts another event where he unveils a new weapon in front of a large audience, but things go way too wrong this time. The gun is called the Sky Sentry, an electromagnetic cannon that can affect the guidance system of any missile headed towards a particular target. To prove its effectiveness, he reveals that 2 missiles are heading towards them right now, but the Sky Sentry fails to operate, and missiles end up coming straight at them. Luckily, Superman arrives and stops the missiles from hitting them, significantly hurting Luthor's ego. He decides he will investigate the issue with the weapon himself because this was no ordinary mistake, and later, he gets an anonymous call stating that this was actually because of sabotage. As he decides to investigate, the caller leads him to a particular site, which turns out to be a trap. Brainiac managed to survive the attack last time by downloading himself onto one of Luthor's computers. Now, he needed Luthor's help to reconstruct a body for himself, which he had almost done, but needed some final human touches. Luthor is held captive and forced to work in captivity by Brainiac to finish his body. Meanwhile, Superman is sure that Luthor will not be this big a failure and that what happened with the machine was sabotage. As he plans to investigate it, Brainiac uses Luthor's simulation to convince Mercy that he is busy with his investigation. But finally, both Mercy and Superman discover that Luthor is missing and only believe that something is wrong. Robots and missiles attack both of them. Finally, they manage to track him down and attack Brainiac, whose body is almost completed by Luthor. This time, Brainiac had become quite powerful and nearly defeated Superman. Mercy uses the Sky Sentry on him, which is effective as it magnetizes him and turns him into something attacked by every metal item around him. Finally, they manage to defeat Brainiac, and Luthor decided to keep the body for himself because it was made entirely from LexCorp's tech. However, we are given another insight into Mercy and Luthor's relationship when Superman asks her why she is always there for him. She states she was a poor girl, and Luthor made her who she became. But all this turns to dust when, by the end, one of the computer terminal falls on Mercy, and Luthor doesn't try to save her. Instead, he gets away with his own life. Later, Superman came and saved her, and Mercy is angry about this because she is shown to hesitate when she works for Luthor at the end of the episode.
Put him down, Baldy!
Mercy?
Luthor and his robots. World's Finest, episodes 16, 17, and 18 of Season 2 of Superman the Animated Series. This trilogy of episodes acts like a movie event and consists of significant developments in the DC animated universe. In short, the story follows Batman coming to Metropolis looking for the Joker, who has taken on the task of killing Superman. Lex Luthor. Yes, you heard it right. The episode features a narrative involving two major DC characters and their arch-enemies. So, the Joker comes across a green dragon statue with quite a myth surrounding it, considering the deaths of his previous owners. But Batman suspects there's more to it and discovers that the dragon statue is made of kryptonite. Joker strikes up a deal with Lex Luthor after going into his office. And even though Luthor doesn't like the idea initially, the fact that Joker will be using kryptonite convinces him about the plan. He agrees to pay a large sum in return for killing Superman. Batman decides to investigate the case and goes to Metropolis, while Bruce Wayne seems to have some work to do with LexCorp. Luthor and Wayne work on an insect-like probe droid called the Wayne/Lex T7 that's supposed to be used for space exploration. It turns out that Luthor intends to use it for military purposes. Still, Wayne rejects the idea, considering he controls the technology and its use, according to their deal. Meanwhile, the Joker manages to capture Lois Lane to get Superman into the trap he had laid for the Man of Steel. However, the plan fails because Batman manages to warn him, and thus, Joker fails in the first attempt. Luthor gives him another chance when the Joker tells him that both Superman and Batman are together on this now. While the deal between the two villains is being kept a secret, Superman finds out about it and reveals it to Batman. Batman interrogated Superman to obtain complete information regarding the deal, only to be attacked by Luthor's goons. Finally, a battle ensued between the Wayne/Lex T7, which was now armed, and Batman, who somehow managed to save himself when Superman arrived and destroyed it. Luthor realizes that now the fingers will be pointed at him, so he goes to Joker and Harley and decides to kill them so they can be blamed for everything that has happened. But he fails to do so, as the duo manages to knock him down and tie him up while Joker intends to destroy everything that Luthor has worked on. Yeah, Well, it seems that Luthor made a foolish move by trusting Joker because trust and Joker never seem to get along, right? So finally, Batman and Superman arrived at the scene. They thwart the Joker's attempts and catch everyone except for the clown, who somehow manages to escape and is presumed dead. An investigation is launched into Luthor while Harley returns to Arkham Asylum. Even though it turned out to be a lousy partnership between the two villains, it planted the seed that will give us the Justice League shortly. With his Injustice gang, Injustice for All, episodes 8 and 9 of Justice League, things took an exciting turn for Lex Luthor when he was found to have acquired an incurable form of blood cancer due to his long-term exposure to kryptonite. Even though he's responsible for it himself, he blames Superman, who wants to help him, on the other hand. Based on an investigation, he is sent to Stryker's Island to serve time there. But instead, he makes an interesting development there. In prison, next to some of the most popular villains in the DC universe, Luthor decides to form a group of super criminals, which consists of Cheetah, Wonder Woman's archenemy, Copperhead, the Shade, Solomon Grundy, the Ultra-Humanite, and Star Sapphire, with the object of destroying the Justice League. The group is given quite an interesting name, the Injustice Gang. Genius, right? So, their first mission fails when they fail to grab hold of one of the Justice League members, so Luthor lashes out at them. But then, they team up with the Joker and manage to capture Batman. But Batman is smart enough to know how to play with this team of misfits and manages to pit them against each other. Meanwhile, Luthor manages to find the secret key to the Watchtower and plant a bomb there. But his plan fails when John Jones warns everyone about the bomb, and Flash manages to save everyone. Ultimately, the group fails as the Ultra-Humanite gets swayed by Batman, and Luthor realizes it was a lousy idea to team up with these villains. Ultimately, they are all sent back to prison, where humanity watches their favorite opera program with a smile, while Luthor continues cursing him.
It's not them.
The President Luthor, A Better World, episodes 37 and 38 of Justice League. Remember the alternate universe episode that we discussed before? Well, this one takes things to a whole new level. In this alternate universe, Luthor becomes the President of the United States and manages to cause quite the chaos, enough to anger all the heroes to limits we wouldn't have imagined as possible, considering they are superheroes. Luthor had run the world into absolute chaos, and when Superman confronts him, it turns out that Luthor, not ashamed of what has happened, blames the people for their reaction to the chaos. He talks about how the people have caused damage to the world, and he blames Superman for being the very reason for this. He has failed to finish Luthor when there was time. As he threatens to wage a nuclear war, Superman kills Luthor with his laser. However, this does not turn out to be a solution. Instead, it launches a series of events that end up causing a lot more damage because the Justice League turns into the judge, jury, and executionist and carries out a totalitarian regimen. They eventually reach the original universe and takes over the Watchtower there, but Luthor realizes their true purpose. In the end, Luthor manages to defeat them and help the Justice League out as part of the deal. Lex Luthor is much more significant in character than we might have expected him to be.
I'd hoped to remain hidden.
Luthor, it's over. Panic in the Sky, Episode 11, Season 2 of Justice League Unlimited. This episode features one of the most mind-blowing dialogues in the DC animated universe's history. During a conversation with Batman, she states that only 3 people on Earth are smart enough to pull off something, and 2 are already at the Watchtower. The third person who might be responsible is Lex Luthor. I still remember getting chills when I watched this episode and heard her say it. Who are the other 2? Is Batman among them? Lex Luthor intends to get his superpowers and manages to make an android body based on Amazon's design. Considering he was dying himself, he plans to use this body to fight the Justice League and kill Superman, who has been responsible for his sickness. Considering the world didn't see the Justice League with good eyes, they would prefer Superman being killed as a heroic moment. But before he can transfer consciousness, he's stopped by Amanda Waller and the Justice League. As he tries to make his final attempt at them, he falls, and suddenly, his body starts transforming into a monstrous being, and a face emerges from his chest that sounds like none other than Brainiac himself. Luthor and his little problem, Darkseid, alive, Episode 12, Season 3 of Justice League Unlimited. So, Luthor tends to do things with outcomes that might be a grave danger to the people. This particular behavior has been present in all the episodes so far. Still, there's the time he ended up unlocking something that he was unaware of, which led to a whole new Pandora's box. Now, Luthor has had a complicated relationship with Brainiac, and they have had a past where Luthor turned into something he had never expected to have. With the prospect of looking for some pieces of Brainiac in space, he converts the Legion of Doom base into a ship. However, the others in the Legion realize that even though his intentions are wild, this is much more about his obsession with Brainiac, so they turn against him. But Luthor can defeat them all and continue with this prospect. When he reaches the coordinates, he decides to collect the pieces, but right then, time is momentarily frozen, and Metron appears and urges Luthor not to continue with his plans, as it might be fatal to the universe. But Luthor is too much in on this now and can't seem to back out, so he continues with his prospects of achieving godhood. As time restores, we witness a figure appear from the smoke, and right there is Darkseid, who has been partially fused with Brainiac. Darkseid thanks Luthor for what he has done and then reveals his plans for destroying Earth and killing them. As he destroys the Legion base, the villains somehow arrive at the Justice League's doorstep, telling them about the problem. How Lex became an ally of the Justice League. Destroyer, Episode 13, Season 3 of Justice League Unlimited. The previous event triggered what would be the biggest battle we got to witness the Justice League in, as all the superheroes and even the villains teamed up to fight the enemy and his apocalyptian fleet. It makes sense because the Justice League will need as much help as possible to defeat Darkseid and his army. But Luthor agrees to become an ally, not to save Earth, but to take revenge on Darkseid for taking Brainiac away from him. But the battle is quite the task, as Darkseid and his army wreaks havoc, and the heroes have difficulty saving themselves. At some point, Metron shows up, and Luthor blames him for knowing the fate of the events, but he still doesn't talk about it. He asks for his help in defeating Darkseid. Metron decides to help Luthor, takes him to the Source Wall Beyond, which is the one thing that can stop Darkseid. Luthor chooses to go inside by himself, and as he reaches in, he is struck by light and screams. Later, during a fight between Superman and Darkseid, Luthor arrives in a suit with the one thing that Darkseid had wanted, the anti-life equation. When Darkseid takes hold of it from Luthor's hand, both suddenly disappear in a flash of light. We don't have any idea if both of them have been killed or if they have reached a whole new plane of being. This is probably one of the most badass endings fans might have expected from Lex Luthor. Marvelous verdict. For a villain who is quite notorious, Lex Luthor surely knows how to clean up after him. From causing significant events to ensuring that none of it falls back on him, Luthor ensures that it doesn't affect him at the end of the day. The most extraordinary moment in the series is when everyone is injured and wounded while battling Darkseid and his army. Still, Luthor arrived in a suit and shook things up, giving us the ending we never expected. This version of the beloved DC villain is probably something none of the other depictions will ever be able to top. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.